Alright, what is going on everyone? I just wanted to make a quick video to show you basically how to keep swing trading basic and show you what I do to keep everything kind of simple and just follow price. So I'm a big proponent of saying that whatever works for you, you want to keep at it. So if swing trading is not for you and it's not for your personality, don't really have to follow this exact strategy. I'm just kind of sharing the information and telling you what I like to do. Same thing if you like swing trading and you have another strategy that works for you, that's great. So keep at what you're doing and get better at that. But for anyone who kind of likes my trading style or kind of relates to it and likes kind of following trends and whatnot and just following price action and keeping things kind of simpler, this is a great kind of video to show you how to do that and kind of how to understand price action a little bit better. So it's very simple. Price action is very easy to read. In my opinion, a stock has a personality. It has a characteristic, and you can kind of follow that, and you know what a stock might be doing by just kind of zooming out and looking a little bit on the bigger time frames, and just kind of keeping an eye and seeing what the stock is kind of developing into, what it's kind of marinating into. So this is going to be more for kind of intermediate time frames. It could be a little bit longer time frame as well. If you're looking to swing on maybe the shorter time frames, it's probably not the best video, but you can kind of get an idea of, again, on the smaller time frames, you can still see smaller trends and kind of follow that as well. But this is kind of on the bigger time frames here, just kind of following the trend of the stock. So I have three examples here, three different tickers that I'll be going over. And the first one here is Home Depot. So the most important thing to understand is, again, like I said, stocks have characteristics. So what I mean by that is a stock will trend and let's say form a base like this and then start breaking out, and then it'll change its character after it is kind of done trending, right? So for example, after it kind of breaks out of this big base right here at the highs, you can see once it kind of came up to these highs here, it'll pull back a little bit and then kind of start changing its character, right? It won't really kind of move like it did here following this 8-day EMA. And continue to push new highs. What it'll do is kind of base out here before making new highs and kind of pushing out. So the easiest way to kind of follow this is using EMAs. So I'm using the 821 and the 50 EMAs to kind of gauge the trend of a stock. And what I like to do is always look for a stock that's basing and consolidating. And that usually will kind of create a new trend. So for example, let's say right here we have Home Depot kind of consolidating um, in this kind of big 8 to 10 month range. The moment it breaks out, it looks like we have a new trend that's kind of beginning, right? And we can kind of see that right here. So after this big uptrend from the lows right here, we have this kind of consolidation for a couple months because we kind of ran out of demand. Supply, we have some supply, right? Sellers are coming in here and we can't make new highs, right? We're just kind of consolidating. The moment we break out of the range, you can see we're starting to push out, make new highs. And this is around the area that I like to get involved. So there's a couple different kind of, I'd say there's 3 to 4 things that you should look for in a trend change and just kind of the characteristic of a stock. So the first thing to look for is, like I said, basing. So whenever you're looking for a trend to change, you're always usually going to see a big base forming, right? After that, you're going to see the EMAs cross over. So for example, after you have price from the highs moving down a bit, you can see you kind of are below the EMAs here, kind of struggling to get over and stay over. You'll see that eventually you'll get this kind of nice EMA cross right here where all the EMAs cross, especially the 8 and 21 EMAs, and the price can hold above the 8-day or the 21 and just kind of ride that as a trend. And that will be your kind of next step for the trend to change. So you want to let the EMAs get above, kind of pop out of this wedge, break out of the base, and then now you have a clean, nice trend that you can ride with the 8 days. So the easiest thing to do is obviously just add a position right when you get a break of the wedge or wherever makes sense to you to add a position around, let's say, anywhere this area, wherever that would have made sense to you to get in. And then after that, there's a couple other times you can get in, and there's obviously some more characters you can see in a stock that's trending like this. The first one would be a back test of the EMA. So sometimes you'll see price pull back to the EMAs, kind of retest, form a constructive base like so to make new highs. And this would be another area you can kind of enter, right? But at this point, obviously, it's a little bit extended. I would have waited for maybe something like this, a pullback all the way down to this area and a new base, obviously pushing up if I didn't really get an entry here. But these are still opportunities to add some size and catch this move all the way up to the highs. So what you'll usually see is again, a little bit of consolidation, a break from the 8-day up into the highs, or the 21-day, or maybe even the 50 sometimes. Usually when you pull back towards the 50, usually you'll see a little bit more basing, kind of something like this before continuing higher. I really like to keep an active trend to the 8 and 21 EMAs, because that is kind of showing me a little bit more strength. So don't really want to get involved when anything is under the 50 or under the 21, unless price broke below the 21 and was able to reclaim it around the same day, printing something like a hammer, right? And that would be good enough for me to maybe take another shot at seeing new highs. But regardless, after we kind of get this breakout here, you can see price moves up into the highs here, and this is kind of the last kind of change in character that you'll see in a stock after it's done kind of trending. So you'll have something I call an extension move. So you basically have price extending pretty far away from the 8 and the 21 EMA, and usually printing something similar to this. And this will usually be a possible top from this kind of trendy move that we started back here, right? Back here from these lows, right? When we kind of got the pop out of this base. This is usually where you're going to see the trend kind of start to change a little bit. So this is where you should always want to be taking profit whenever you get extended from the 8 and the 21 EMA, because usually you'll have price retest those areas. So now after we kind of get this extension move, this is where you should start taking off your size, depending on obviously if you got in here or maybe even here, you're still in profit. So you can take off some size there. And then from there on, you just want to kind of follow and see what the stock wants to do, because it could kind of consolidate right above the 8 and 21 and push out again, make new highs. But usually it's going to try to move down to the 8 and 21, kind of bounce off, see some buyers, and it's going to fail to make a new high. And the moment it fails to make a new high, to me, the trend is broken, right? And we kind of have a little bit of a broken chart. That doesn't mean you should short it unless that's what you like to do, but it just means that the trend is over, and I won't be looking at the stock as much until it can start basing again. So something like this, right? So for me, HD didn't really have that many opportunities here to play this. Obviously, I have this kind of downtrend break charted right here. This could have been a possible scenario. Maybe rode this up, but it would have been dragging your account a little bit, in my opinion, especially if you trade with options. Um, so what I would like to do is wait for this bigger break to happen, which happened right here, and then you were able to catch, move possibly all the way up into the highs. And you can kind of see the same idea where we have this trend kind of changing here, right? After this extension, we're below all the EMAs. Now we have a little bit of a choppier market in HD. And after we can kind of start basing, consolidating a little bit, we have our 821 cross here. We're breaking out of this range, and you can see prices kind of shooting out of this range, making new highs, kind of riding the 8 EMA. And again, same thing, right? We have the crossover back to the 8 and the 21. That's our kind of third thing that we're looking for in the characteristic of a stock. And then we have a new high here, extended from the EMAs, and this will usually be again a trend change, right? So this is kind of the area you want to take profits. Now it doesn't mean that HD can't see new highs, right? It can kind of come down maybe to 21 and push out. It just means that this is the area that I'd probably look to take profits, and more likely than not, you will see pullback maybe down to the 21 if the 8-day doesn't hold. And the same thing we kind of saw here, a little bit of consolidation before making new highs if it wants to make new highs. Now another thing that's important to note is price is always going to move within these big bases. And this is how I've been kind of just viewing price. It's always going to be moving in these big bases, and it's always going to want to stay above if it wants to make new highs. So if you have a healthy market trend, and we're talking a bigger kind of longer term trend, you will see that price will stay above the big bases that it has created. So for example, right here, we have this kind of trend at the highs of this base. You can see price is staying above, right? After it broke out of this base, I mean, as of now, price is staying above. So as long as it can kind of stay above here, above the 341 level on HD, it still has room to trend higher. The moment it kind of comes back into range, this is when we start getting into a choppier market, and something that I like to call kind of like, just call it like a bear market for the actual stock, right? Because it's not really going to do anything, and it's going to be in no man's land. So it's not trending anymore. It might not be trending downwards, but it's just going to base before it can make new highs. So whether that is some catalyst that it needs to kind of push out, I think that at that point you don't want to touch the stock anymore. At this point, you can still trade the name. Obviously, I'd wait for a little bit of a pullback, but again, you have a little bit more of a smaller time frame consolidation here, And this would be your kind of next level to watch, right? Because for example, we talked about how price pops here and pushes out. This is the EMA crossback, or the retest of the EMAs, and this is kind of the extension, right? So kind of the end of the trend. But if price is still in a healthy trend here, and this is still a trendy move from this breakout, if it comes to this base area and holds at the highs, it can still push out and make new highs, right? It can still be a nice trendy move. If it doesn't, then it'll probably retest the bigger base, right? Because at this point, obviously there's still some buyers here that missed the original move here on this breakout, and they want to buy again at these prices. And um, same thing here, right? We have buyers that missed maybe this move here and they want to buy again at these prices. And that's why these areas are so critical for price to hold. The moment it can't hold below, all these buyers that are getting back in here probably get stopped out. And now you just have a choppy market, right? Because you don't really have that much support. People at this area that bought in here, or missed this move here, they don't really care anymore because price is all the way down at this area, and it's not kind of like an area of importance relevant to this base here. So at this point, there's not really a point for price to kind of push back out and start trending. So the moment you see a little bit of a failed trend and price moving below a previous high and not being able to hold it, at that point, I don't really want to look at the name anymore. It can continue higher and it can shake out some breakout traders that maybe missed or bought right at the breakout and price moved below, and maybe it pushes out. But to me, more likely than not, it's not going to be that interesting, and you won't really see it do too much for a while. I think it'll base a bit before it continues higher if it is going to see higher prices. So um, obviously these trends can be used for the downside as well. This is just an upside, a an example of an upside push here. But you can obviously use the same idea for a downside move, but usually in a bull market you will see something that trends like this. And usually bear markets are going to be shorter, so you won't really see longer term bear trends. But you will see what I talked about, right, where price isn't holding those bases, and you have those trend changes on maybe the lower time frames that you can trade if you are going short. But yeah, this is kind of an example here on HD. Let's move over to Tesla, because this one was another one that, in my opinion, was pretty easy to trade. We have kind of the same idea here really throughout the whole year. It was pretty easy to trade. So first idea, I would say right here back around the 194 price point. Obviously, this is after the split. But you can kind of see the same idea, right? We have this COVID crash here. We have a little bit of some basing. And at this point, unless you obviously bought the lows, which is kind of hard to time the lows here, um, there's no reason to really be involved in this name unless you got in right here when you got kind of the 821 cross and price was kind of basing up. To me, the place where it makes the most sense to kind of get involved into this name and really see that it has momentum is around this area where it starts breaking the base, right? So we can see we're already kind of trending healthily above the 8 and the 21. But right here is really where we kind of get this pop. So it popped up into the base, kind of put in a little bit of a doji here, and then pushed out. And then at this moment, where we kind of push out here and we're holding this base that I talked about, right? As long as we hold the highs, this is where you kind of want to get involved. And this is kind of your wedge breakout and a little bit of the back test of the EMAs. Now you have another constructive pattern to kind of play here. And you also see prices kind of pushing out. Now another thing I obviously want to make sure that everyone watches is volume, because that is very important as well. Whenever you're seeing a lot of volume on big breakouts, especially on big base breakouts, that's usually when you want to get involved because most people are kind of getting involved there, right? The only time I wouldn't want to get involved when I see higher volume is when I see higher volume extended from the EMAs, something like this, right? Where you can see this high volume right here, very extended from this moving average, the 8-day and the 21-day, because that usually means that's people capitulating profits from this move here, right? So they're kind of taking profits off, um, and that's why you'll see higher volume on something that's extended from the EMAs. At that point, I don't want to get involved, but right when price kind of starts pushing out of the big base, and I see a little bit of higher volume, I like that a lot. I just want to see people getting involved. And obviously then I just kind of ride the trend, right? So here you have price kind of pushing up. If you got kind of an entry here or maybe here, wherever you decided to jump in, or maybe even on the retest if that's the type of trader that you are, you can see price kind of pushes up and now you're in a healthy trend, right? As long as the 8-day is holding, you're in a healthy trend. And here we have, again, the first sign that I talked about, a little bit of the trend kind of changing a little bit, right? price is kind of extended from the EMAs, and you have a little bit of a pullback. You can see the 8 day is not really holding anymore. It was holding all the way up to here. That's the first close below the 8 day. And then you have a little bit of some sloppy price action. But really all you're forming here is just kind of an EMA pullback, right? Kind of coming down to the 21, kind of shake out right here at the lows, and then pop kind of right back up with high volume. And again, this is the area that I'm getting interested to get back in because we're reclaiming the 8 and the 21. We're kind of popping out of the wedge from this reclaim, and we're seeing high volume, right? We saw low volume, all of this kind of area here where price was consolidating. And then the moment we pop out, higher volume, we're above the EMAs, and again, we're starting to trend. So same idea here. You have price kind of pushing up into the highs, and then you have a little bit of an extension from the 8 EMA, and you can kind of see the same exact patterns are going to form over time, over time. So there's so many opportunities for you to kind of get into a stock that is trending. There's really so many opportunities. Same idea right here, right? After this kind of big trend here, price didn't come back all the way down and break below this big base. So we're still trending from this area here in kind of the COVID lows after kind of the COVID crash. So price is still here in an uptrend, and obviously this is easy for me to say after looking at price after it's kind of made its move, and yeah, like obviously it's easier said than done to kind of see this and see everything happening in real time, but it's just kind of getting the perspective of how a stock is going to move. So for example, right here, same idea, right? We're kind of basing, and obviously we know this was kind of that time where um, Tesla got the S&P 500 inclusion right here. But it's kind of the same idea, right? We're seeing this kind of base breakout right here, pulling back. This is kind of the EMA pullback that we're looking at here. Price is a little bit extended from the EMAs. It's kind of changing its character a little bit. You can see it's starting to base maybe the other way, right? So it's basing, trying to push out, but it's not making new highs, right? In the moment it's not making new highs, you can kind of see the weakness showing. And then you can see kind of crossing below the 821, below the 50, you don't really want to be involved because at this point it's just going to be kind of choppy. And to me, I don't really see any opportunities here on Tesla until it starts breaking out again of the base, right? So you have, obviously, this is a base high where you could have got involved back here, but there's many more times that you couldn't got involved, right? Obviously, on this kind of trend where it broke out right here on these pops, you can see right after it started breaking out right here, every single time it made a new base, it was holding above it. And that's exactly what I mean by these big bases that you can kind of use as pivots to play against the stock, right? So you have this area here holding, and then again you have a big base here forming. You have a retest holding, kind of a EMA pullback, and then a push out of there. So these are all these wedge pops that you can play. And then obviously price starts trending. You can see it's been holding that the 8 day all the way up. And again, here we have the extension. So right here we're way extended over the 8 day, and you can kind of see why we pull back, right? Obviously now market conditions are not great for this to continue higher, but it's kind of the same idea, right? We're seeing that extension. We're kind of seeing trend change. At this point, I don't really want to be involved too much into Tesla since it looks like it put in that lower high right here, right? So it's trying to kind of push out, but sellers are still strong right here. It can't really break above the recent highs. What it might do is base now. This doesn't mean that Tesla needs to come back all the way to retest $900, which is kind of this area of the big base, but it could, right? It still has the 50 that it can hold on to right here. So it still has a lot of opportunities, but what I'm saying here is there's no reason to get long here just yet, unless you're obviously using another strategy that works for you and you like. But for what I'm saying and how I view price action, to me, there's no reason to get long here just yet. So I would wait for price to come down maybe to the 50, prove itself, kind of get back above the 8 and 21, and then maybe pop out of something like this, right? A wedge or some sort of consolidation that proves that it wants higher, right? Something like this, and kind of show me the trend. So to me, I don't want to get involved on something like this. This looks to me like it's kind of more of a broken chart at this point. Now again, it doesn't mean you have to short it. Doesn't mean that it has to come down. It just means that I think it might base out right before pushing higher. I just don't think it's ready to push higher yet. Now I might be wrong. I'm not always right. Obviously, I'm not the best trader in the world, but it is something to look at, and it is something that we can see happen. So this is an example with Tesla here. Probably, obviously, price comes down again to test maybe the 50 or whatnot before it can start healthily trending. And again, as long as it's above this 893 base right here, it's still in a huge trend, still in a huge uptrend relative to this base, right? So we're still in a big uptrend. As long as price can hold above, and not come down back into this range here, we will see Tesla at higher prices. The moment it kind of comes down into this range and starts acting a little bit choppy, that's when you should kind of lose a little bit of conviction and have an idea that you might chop around a little bit more before coming higher. You might come down to test maybe lower prices, or this stock needs a little bit more of a catalyst to continue higher. Um, Now, obviously, alongside with the TA, so the technical analysis, you obviously want to have a little bit of conviction and know what the story is behind the stock. So like for example, Tesla, you want to know what Tesla is and what the story is and what the growth is and how people are kind of attached to the Tesla brand, right? You want to know what Tesla is, at least in my opinion. You don't have to, but I like to know what I'm trading and what I own. So yeah, know the story. You don't have to look at all the fundamentals in every single earnings report. I think that there's no reason not to. It's a pretty quick skim, and you can kind of look at what the numbers are, what the growth is for maybe next quarter or next year, what they're guiding for. And that's how you can kind of have conviction to stay in the name, right? Because there's always going to be drawdowns, and people are always going to be looking at their portfolios day to day and maybe getting shaked out here, right, where you're kind of chopping around, but there's no reason to because you're holding the 8-day and you have strong conviction in the name, right? It just maybe posted good delivery numbers, or Elon Musk is looking for something obviously to create in the future. So there's always going to be a need for conviction, and knowing the story, in my opinion, is very important for you to be able to hold this through some of the drawdowns, or maybe some of the choppiness, so you don't want to hold it through, right? So yeah, moving on to the last name, just kind of giving you a little bit more of examples, but you can see this on basically any ticker. This is UPST, so obviously we know this was a very strong name this year after some really killer earnings. I think three quarters in a row here. Last earnings or quarters earnings were great, and that's kind of what started this move here. But again, you can kind of see the idea that I'm talking about, right? So right here we have this big base, and then we have the break right here. So break right here on higher volume on a big earnings kind of uh, push, right? And I really like to look at these big earning pushes and kind of get involved here if I see high volume, because a lot of people kind of a big earnings gap up, or just a huge gap up, is usually just the market kind of getting caught off guard, right? And you can see a lot of volume here. Usually some big people are getting involved here. Obviously people who have capital to create a strong trending move like this. And this is what I like to watch out for. So a lot of people might avoid gap ups, but I like to look for a gap up and see if it can hold against the gap, right? So for example, right here, UPST kind of gapped up. First day that it gapped up, held against the gap. And that means that obviously there's a good chance that price will move against it, right? And push the other way. So I like to look for stuff like this. It's actually showing a lot of strength. I obviously know the story of UPST, a very strong company. Um, really great earnings, especially this quarter here. So a lot of conviction on this name, and I was able to jump into this trade, and this was actually one of my best trades of the year. So you want to have conviction. You want to know exactly what your kind of strategy is, and you want to be able to execute and be able to hold through these drawdowns, right? So for example, the reason why this was so easy to hold up into these highs is because, again, like I said, it was a very nice trendy move, right? Price was respecting the 8-day all the way up until it finally broke right here on the 28th, but you had basically a month or two of price just respecting the 8-day, and this is a very strong trend. If price isn't closing below the 8-day and it's kind of holding on to it the whole time, this is still a very strong trend. A lot of names can't hold the 8-day a month, month to month, right? So if you see something like this, very strong trend. Now, obviously, you don't want to get involved up here into the highs, because at this point, trend is kind of over. But you can see what I'm talking about, right? You have price breaking out, you have a little bit of a pullback to these areas here, and then you have an extension, right? You have price pushing out. You can see it made a new base right here, held well, right? You can see it kind of broke out of this base, held right here, and then pushed out. And you can see the same thing here. Price is making a base after you kind of pull back to the EMAs. And again, it kind of pushed out, got a little bit extended here, pulled back to the 8 and the 21, was able to hold the 8 and 21 well, and again held the big base that it formed here, and then pushed out to the highs. And then here it was already starting to get overextended. And like I said, when you're far away from the EMAs, usually, and you're seeing higher volume there, that is usually going to be capitulation and people starting to take profits. So the moment you can't hold over a previous base high, like I said here, right? You can kind of see that price is starting to become a little bit broken, and this becomes a little bit more of a broken chart, right? So in respect to this area right here, price is kind of starting um, to break the lows, right? And kind of break this trend right here. Now, obviously, on the bigger scale, we're still trending from this bigger base that we broke, and you can kind of see that in perspective to where price is right now. As long as it kind of holds up into these areas here, 173, you're still in a big uptrend from this area right here, this big base that it broke out of. The moment it kind of comes back into this range, now I'm not really interested in this name, and I think it's really honestly garbage. So I wouldn't really look at it. But at this point, if it's coming back down here to this area and it shows another kind of base here and it kind of pops out, uh, kind of comes back to retest the EMAs, now we're trending again and we can make new highs. So obviously, it might need a catalyst or whatever to do that. But that's why you want to kind of follow the price, right? And really just trade only things that make sense. Because to me, at this point, there's no, uh, it doesn't really make sense to buy this just yet. Even here, right? People are trying to buy this on the gap down. There's not really any point because you're not really trending yet. So obviously, you can always look to time bottoms and whatnot. But to me, it's a lot easier to just wait for something to start trending and just following that trend, right? Just following price, like I kind of um, went over in the HD or Home Depot example. So yeah, going back to kind of this area here, we can see again, like I said, price is breaking below this recent pivot high, and now it's just kind of becoming choppy, right? You can see the 8 and 21 EMA are kind of crossing to the downside. Price isn't really kind of holding the EMAs. It's not looking too well. And then it's also building a downside base, something like this, right? So you can see the moment it breaks out, obviously on earnings, you can kind of see that we're starting to begin to trend down here again. So now the trend really is over. But at this point, once we have this extension here, you should already be wary or taking some profits at this point. And once you start breaking below the 8 day, breaking below the 21, this is where most of your positions should be out. And you should be looking at the next kind of area of importance to see if that holds to maybe add on to your position. Now, this isn't really for like investing. Obviously, if you believe in the company and you want to hold through the drawdowns and whatnot, that's fine. To me, this is more kind of intermediate short term swing trading. So obviously, you still want to know and believe in the story of the company, but don't let kind of I guess technical analysis affect exactly like what you are investing in. But yeah, that's just kind of a little bit of a video of the basics, in my opinion, of swing trading. I know there might have been a lot in here, and it might not seem that basic, but I just want to go over everything that I kind of use to basically just ride the trends, right, and keep everything simple. And make sure that the most important thing, in my opinion, is my money is always active in places that make sense, right? Because like I said here, it doesn't make sense for me to be actively long because there's not really anything going on. Even here, it doesn't really make too much sense until we start kind of popping out of the wedge, because it's just money that is tied up and it's not really doing much, right? And again, it's different from investing, right? If you're just swing trading, intermediate swing trading, and whatnot, you don't want to have tied up capital. I'm not saying you should not be investing in the company if you believe in it. Again, that is different because I know a lot of people might kind of confuse those two concepts. Um, but yeah, hopefully everyone was able to learn something, and hopefully this made maybe your swing trading a little bit more easier, and you can kind of understand the concepts of just kind of riding the trends and letting price do the talking, and not getting really shaken out of these moves, right? Because a lot of people ask me how are you able to hold something for, let's say, this whole move here. Again, you're just looking at the 8 day. You have conviction in the story. You know the name, right? You know exactly what they do, what the company does. You know what their numbers are, and you have conviction, right? And again, you're just letting technicals kind of do the talking and kind of the four stages of a personality of a stock. You're just kind of following that, and as long as you're seeing what you like to see, no reason to get shaken out of a name, and you can again always add more, right? So for example, here on UPSD, could have added more on this maybe a retest of the highs of this high here at the base that I talked about, and kind of when it started popping back up above the 8 and 21, pushing out new highs. Um, and obviously up here taking profits and whatnot and capitulated. But yeah, again, hopefully this helped out. Um, I'll be trying to make more videos similar to this. So see you guys next time.